Oh my, it's been what, 4 months since I last did an episode? What'd I miss? Oh my gosh.
We're singing, wait, it's not over now. We've been down, but we've never been out. Yeah, we're the dark horses.
Hey everyone, it's Mr. Gerald Lord here, and while I'd love to regale you with all the stories about the wonderful time I've had the last couple of months I've been away, just watching the world burn in its own stupidity and greed, I'd much rather just get into the story of the day, really the story of the year. Happening now. Sort of. Oh. Should I even say the word? Might as well. If YouTube cares enough to censor this, they're clearly engaging in the wrong priorities. Coronavirus. It's the reason some of you listening right now are in a hospital, and the rest of you have to stay at home in quarantine. It's the reason a lot of you aren't working right now, and it's the reason the rest of you who are working right now are afraid of encountering someone with a cough. Before I start with my thoughts on coronavirus, let's do a very brief road so far to determine how we got to where we are now. So one of the key issues with pandemics is very rarely can we go back to a case and say with absolute certainty this person was the first case. Because the issue with that is they might be the first reported case, but that doesn't mean they were the first case. For instance, there is one theory that says it is believed that the first case of coronavirus is a 55-year-old individual in Hubei province of China that dates back to November 17th of 2019. However, most commonly, the first known case of coronavirus is traced back to December 1st, 2019, to the city of Wuhan, located in the province of Hubei, China. Coronavirus disease is a respiratory illness brought on by severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, but specifically caused by the strain SARS-CoV-2. Without getting too technical and scientific, the coronavirus is a respiratory illness. It attacks the lungs of a person. Naturally, since the coronavirus is a respiratory illness, the two most common symptoms include a dry cough and fever, with the third most common symptom being fatigue. These three symptoms are also known as the symptoms that in normal circumstances you most likely aren't going to think are leading to anything serious. Couple this with the fact that people who have the virus can be asymptomatic and still pass it on anywhere from 2 to 14 days, and in some cases even longer than that, and it should be no surprise that this thing has reached pandemic levels. What started off as a reported few cases in China traced back to what was believed to be a market in Wuhan that sold snakes and bats, by the end of December had become dozens of cases where Chinese officials reportedly weren't quite sure what it is they were dealing with. One of the interesting things about the coronavirus is many of the cases that result in death tend to be as a result of some other complication, exacerbated by the virus itself. For instance, in December of 2019, many of the deaths in China were traced to patients suffering from pneumonia, of which the cause was unknown at the time. By the time the Chinese authorities seemed to realize the magnitude of what they were dealing with in mid-January of 2020, the virus had already made its way outside of mainland China. Cases were already springing up in neighboring countries like Thailand, South Korea, and Japan. Couple this with the fact that it was spreading during the holiday season and several Chinese citizens were traveling abroad, and we had the perfect storm brewing. By January 21st, 2020, the first case of coronavirus was found in Washington state and located in the United States of America by a man in his 30s reporting symptoms after returning from a trip to Wuhan, China. And then everything escalated rather quickly. The Chinese government declared a lockdown in the city of Wuhan, China. Planes, trains, and all travel out of and within the city was shut down. as well as lockdowns were put in place throughout the country later on. To an outside observer, the Chinese government's response was complete change of attitude, as their initial response was to have authorities reprimand the Chinese doctor who rang alarm bells about the dangers the virus posed. Dr. Li Wenliang was actually made to sign a statement by Chinese authorities saying his warnings about the coronavirus had been an unfounded and illegal rumor. He would have reported to have died from the virus itself on February 7th of 2020. But going back to the progression of events worldwide, it was due to how rapidly the case number of infected was spreading, as well as the severity of shift in attitude by the Chinese government regarding the virus by late January, that the World Health Organization had to declare a global health emergency on January 30th. On January 31st, just a day later, American President Donald John Trump, who among other prominent individuals worldwide had also downplayed the threat the virus posed, declared restricted travel for foreigners who had previously visited China within the last 14 days. Other countries eventually would do the same. From this point on, the story progresses very quickly. Cases of coronavirus start to spring up all around the world in February and March. You got cruise ships like the Diamond Princess ship in Southeast Asia, with more than 3,600 passengers getting quarantined at a port in Yokohama, Japan, because a number of people on the ship test positive for coronavirus. And this was on February 5th of 2020. By mid-February, cases of the virus start to spring up in Europe, with France reporting its first death to the virus on February 14th of 2020. Italy, in particular, among European nations, sees the very major surge in cases of the virus springing up, and cases start to spring up in Southwest Asia as well, as Iran reports its first case. South America starts to report cases by late February, and Sub-Saharan Africa records its first infection of coronavirus at the end of February, on February 28th also. In a matter of 1 month, that is the month of February, official total worldwide cases of people having coronavirus had gone from a little over 10,000 to over 80,000. The United States at this point starts to impose more travel restrictions, and by March 11th, Donald Trump announced a 30-day ban on travelers from European countries other than Britain, and just 2 days later, Donald Trump declares the pandemic a national emergency for the United States. The European Union, on March 17th, announces it is barring non-essential travel for 30 days from outside the bloc of nations. At this point, as March reached a close, several countries in Europe hit hardest by the virus, including Italy, France, Great Britain, and Spain, initiate some form of lockdown. Meanwhile, in the origin country of the virus, China officially reports that it had curbed the spread of the virus internally and reports 0 cases. The official toll of the virus in China, according to Chinese officials, as of the end of March and still to this time, is roughly a little over 81,000 cases and below 3,500 deaths. And according to the Chinese government, the spread of the virus has essentially dropped to non-existent levels. Meanwhile, in the United States, by the end of March, it is officially the country with the most confirmed cases, having overtaken Italy and China in that regard. The states hit hardest by the virus are New York State, Washington State, and California at first, though that quickly spirals further out of control as the virus spreads to other states. A national lockdown is not announced by Donald Trump, as he defers that authority to the governors of their respective states. All while this is occurring, the economy takes a turn for the worse, as several businesses ranging from industries in travel, like cruise lines and airline companies, to several other small and large businesses are negatively impacted by the pandemic. And meanwhile, the global supply chain takes a hit, as cases continue to increase in many countries despite efforts to flatten the curve and stifle the spread of the virus. Unemployment claims in the United States skyrocket. Those who can work from home remotely do so, while several other companies who can't have their employees continue to go to work as if they are deemed essential, and those who are not deemed essential are essentially either losing their jobs or furloughed. For many Americans who live from paycheck to paycheck, the struggle does not dissipate with the lockdown or quarantine orders. And for many essential employees, the risk of infection is truly real, yet they cannot simply stay home. Because of this pandemic and the ensuing recession, the U.S. government found itself having to release a stimulus relief package, much of which would go to the benefit of businesses and corporations, with a one-time payment being distributed to American taxpayers and citizens of roughly $1,200, with another $500 per child for individuals and families below a certain income level. Though truly, this virus has altered daily life for so many on this earth as it continues its path of destruction. As of this recording, the official worldwide case count stands at over 1.7 million reported cases, and with over 108,000 reported deaths, of which, of the total cases, 402,000, a little bit over that number actually, are reported as recoveries. Alright, so here's where I go into the opinion section of this segment. Fair warning, this section of the segment is not suitable for children. So what are my thoughts on this whole situation? Okay, let's start with the obvious. The Chinese Communist Party, that is to say the Chinese government, is lying about their numbers. There is no doubt in my mind about this. There is absolutely no way that the country with the largest population in the world, where this virus originated from, with a city of 11 million people, I don't believe for a single solitary second this country only had a little over 80,000 cases, of which barely 3,500 cases resulted in death. The Chinese government is greatly understating and outright hiding their death count and infection count for the sake of optics. Several stories have broken about how several shipments of urns have been sent to the city where the virus originated, and this is raising doubts about the official tally, as well as stories about the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency trying to investigate the true death tolls for China. It is incredibly clear that China's government lied about the extent of the virus, downplayed the dangers of the virus to the international community, and is still lying about the death count. That isn't to say that I don't think other nations are hiding their real numbers. The usual totalitarian regimes come to mind. Your North Korea, Russia, Iran is another one. But countries that had financial incentive also probably did it. I'm looking at Japan, which up until late last month was expected to host the Tokyo Olympics this summer. And then it was announced that it was being postponed for 2021. I wouldn't be surprised if they were downplaying those numbers of coronavirus cases before March 24th. For example, if you look specifically at their total case count, actually, you'd notice it's pretty much until March 24th that the virus case count looks fairly steady. It's pretty flat, and then once the announcement about the games being postponed is made, Japan's case count jumps dramatically. I also wouldn't be surprised if some states within the United States of America are underreporting their numbers. California, especially given its population relative to the rest of the country, seems to be getting off rather unscathed in comparison to states like New York and New Jersey. All in all, though, it goes without saying that the official numbers aren't going to get accurate, considering how many people with the virus may end up never reporting to a hospital and just recover on their own. But it is important to note that there is definitely something off about the numbers some countries are reporting, especially China. China is lying. We need to get the real numbers. But moving beyond the case and death counts, I want to talk about the origin of this virus. There is speculation abound as to where this virus came from. Some say it stems from the market in Wuhan that was selling bats and other wild animals for consumption. It seems like only yesterday everyone was joking about the dangers of eating bat soup. I don't buy it. Everything about this virus, from the fact that it the people who carry it can be asymptomatic anywhere from 2 to 14 days or longer, to the fact that it can stay on surfaces for days. It stays in the air for a few hours. The symptoms match general flu-like symptoms, which make it easier for people to think nothing of the virus if they start developing symptoms. All of these factors make it too good of a perfect storm for a viral pandemic. And look, I'm the first to admit it. I believe nature is a bitch. Hell, I have a segment called Nature Hates Us. But this is too perfect, too well crafted for me to give nature the credit. I am strongly of the opinion that this is a virus that somehow escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology lab located in China, and I'm willing to say I believe that the coronavirus may be an escaped bioweapon. Before everyone starts typing up their comments, though, I can already see the tinfoil hat jokes coming. I want to say straight up, I don't buy into conspiracy theories floating out that somehow Bill Gates orchestrated this, or that this is all part of some grand conspiracy to microchip us all. I'm more inclined to believe that there are some parties who are taking advantage of this crisis to push their agenda, but to say this was intentionally orchestrated is a leap too far for me. That said, considering I've already referenced one other segment, and since this show is called Another Point of View, I'm willing to give credence to the argument that the current coronavirus pandemic is a natural phenomenon that was warned of for some time now, and there was no human involvement in making or spread of this virus. So, even though I'm still happening now right now, quote, here's a recommendation. If you want that perspective, I would suggest reading the book Spillover, Animal Infections and the Next Human Pandemic by David Quayman. It's from 2012, but it did warn of an outbreak similar to the one we're currently experiencing. Also, since it was recommended to me, I would like to give credit to a friend of the show for recommending this book to read to yours truly. All that said, though, I still think this virus came out of a lab. Would be happy to be proven wrong, though. And finally, for my most controversial point on the opinion portion of this Happening Now segment, with regard to the coronavirus. Oh, I know this is going to be an unpopular position, but I will say it anyways. This virus is among one of the most horrid plagues humanity has ever experienced. It is predicted that it will have no seasonality to it. It has brought everyday life to a standstill, killed over 100,000 people, and it barely looks like it's just getting started. Even if this whole pandemic came to an end tomorrow, which it isn't going to, it's not going to end anytime soon, but even if it did, the economic and systemic damage this plague has caused will still be felt for years to come. And humanity, I know you don't want to hear this, but I am solidly of the opinion we, collectively, we deserve it. Call it divine wrath, call it karma, call it what you will. This pandemic is a punishment upon us all. The recession that will follow this pandemic is a punishment to the many American and European businesses and multinational corporations that sold their principles and ideals to make a quick buck by doing business with a dreadful repressive government like China. This includes the sports league, like the National Basketball Association, which now see their revenues dry up and their seasons postponed because of this virus. Just like it is a punishment to the cinematic industry, which caters to the demands of the Chinese government to censor or remove certain scenes in Hollywood films. Now those movies have no audiences to view them in movie theaters, while other film projects have been cancelled. The systematic political upheaval that will follow this pandemic is a punishment to the many governments around the world which exploit and repress their citizens or have outright undermined principles which are the underpinnings of national sovereignty. I am referring to things like the dreadful decades worth of foreign meddling and intervention by the U.S. in other countries, the drone strikes with 90% civilian casualties. I'm referring to nations in the European Union that blatantly allowed uncontrolled immigration into the continent with no regard for the strain and impact such large amounts of immigration have on the social safety programs in these countries. But more than anything, More than any of that, this virus itself is a punishment to each and every single individual out there that willfully chose to let the people with power currently mishandling this crisis to stay in these positions of authority and pull the wool over our eyes to all the foul deeds being done in the name of patriotism, profit, or national security. We deserve this. There is no doubt about it. Whether it is due to our willful ignorance in choosing to not take action and ignore the terrible things our governments and corporations do and turning a blind eye to it all, or whether due to our vanity and fixation on our social media for the sake of boosting our egos and sense of self-importance, we deserve this. How could anyone disagree with that statement when there is actual footage of people in grocery stores opening containers of drinks to spit into them, or intentionally licking surfaces, or opening containers of ice cream to lick them and then put them back on the shelf? We deserve this. That's what I think when I see images of large gatherings of people going on spring break at the beach despite warnings of a fucking virus. Congratulations, humanity. The stupidity of imbeciles and the uninformed, as well as those of us who enable them, have brought upon you a global pandemic, the likes of which you have not seen since the outbreak of Spanish influenza following the First World War, as well as a potential global depression, the likes of which you have not seen since the Great Depression preceding the Second World War. My advice to humanity and the many nations of the world is to fucking get it together. Stop enabling evil. Stop allowing yourselves to be reigned by incompetent dunces. And make sure the individuals within the government of China pay dearly for their role in downplaying the threat of this virus. That's all I have to say, and that's it for this installment of the show. There will be no singing of a song. It would not be right. Instead, I ask you to take a moment to remember the thousands who have died because of this virus and to implore whatever higher power you can think of to have mercy on the many who will be impacted by it. Take care, listeners, and stay safe. Until next time.